wanted to have this conversation because this seems to be the big topic on Twitter right now is, okay, well, what's the hedge going to be? Who's going to be the competition? And so, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because it seems like people have their favorites on what the direction is, and we'll obviously spend a ton of time this offseason discussing it because both of us are in agreement. That we want to see a better hedge. We want to see some competition there. We want to see Locke pushed one way or the other. But once the Jets won that game, it did change a little bit of the way this offseason is framed because the Broncos probably won't have a shot at Darnold. And that was the guy. That was going to hopefully be the guy that the Broncos would bring in because they do like him. Not going to bring in Josh Rosen.
Rosen won't be here.
They're
Carson Wentz is more Palmer's guy.
They're not going to get Wentz. They're not going to get Stafford. And so then we get into the Nick Foles and the Gardner Minshew's. Mm-hmm. And you said it right there. I mean, would Broncos fans freak out about the prospects of this team if Nick Foles is starting for it? I don't think any more than what they have with Drew Lock because Nick Foles is a known commodity, but it's not known for consistency. Mm-hmm. So, yes, he won a championship. Yeah, you can say that. He won a championship. He helped carry the Eagles to a championship. But at the same time, we can point to all the other seasons of the Nick Foles eras and just say, yeah, but what if he's this Nick Foles when he gets here? And what if he doesn't quite click with everything and he's not finding rhythm? Then that leans to Drew Lock. So I think what the sum of this comes back to, you should be rooting for Drew Lock to succeed. You should be rooting and wanting Drew Lock to be the guy because the other options aren't necessarily sure things.
Not even sure things, not even improvements.
Right.
That's the thing. Nick Foles never been really successful outside of Philadelphia. I mean, you go back and look at all the shots that he's had outside of Philadelphia. Look at the Rams. And that didn't work. You look at the Jags, that didn't work. Kansas City, that didn't work. Chicago. The only time that Nick Foles was really successful was when he had an elite offensive line in Philadelphia that was able to protect him and buy him time. And that's really what it was. As long as if you got a strong run game and you got an elite offensive line and you can protect him, he can make some throws. But he's like a younger Flacco or whatever in the end. I mean, it's just a guy, and he's kind of just a guy, and that's that. So I don't know that again, these names I'm putting out there. This is. And there's a relationship there, so that's one of them. But I just don't know that that's an improvement. I don't know that makes things better. Nick Foles is a capable backup, I guess, and that's kind of the one. Like if you can get him cheap enough, that's the one where you bring him in. You say, okay, you and Locke, you're duking it out. But the competition is good. I saw somebody the other day saying a quarterback competition is a bad thing. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Like the idea that competition doesn't breed excellence is stupidity.
Okay, well, hold on. I am not a huge competition at quarterback guy, and I've told you that for a while. I am not big on that. This might be a little bit of the exception because I've been saying all year that I wanted somebody in here to push Locke. Like I wanted that to be the case. And they didn't have that, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity. It's a weird offseason, too. Like in the end, like even if you had somebody here to really push Locke, what would it really matter? You didn't get preseason games to actually have a battle. Yep. So this next offseason, you get OTAs, you get mandatory minicamp, you get a preseason, right? And that's a little bit different scenario. And I want that decision made sooner rather than later. I don't want it to be drug into the third and fourth preseason games because at that point you do need to have the starter out there working with the ones.
There's somebody I talked to the other day that suggested that Blake Bortles was in the mix as much as anybody too. That's another thing that kind of scares me a little bit. They were just putting him on bubble wrap this year. The idea was for him to learn the offense and then come in and be the guy next year. In battling Drew Lock. But I'm just I'm tired of the Kevin Hogans and the Jeff Driscolls and all that. And I understand, and I advocated for doing that this year because you wanted to come into the season, make sure it's Lock's team and give him every opportunity. And, and they have, but in the end, Drew Lock really, he hadn't taken the job. He hasn't sit there and made the job his own. We've seen improvements from him. And good.
But he has not dominated.
But he hasn't dominated. He hasn't put that question out of the air. If you have a question, if that question exists, then he hasn't taken the job. And that's the thing. So, part of that's injury. Part of that's his own inconsistency. I'm willing to admit it. I hope that over the next 2 weeks he's dominant. But, reality says that, he probably needs some competition next year. And at that point, if you've had a year in a system and you don't do better than a guy they just brought in, then I think that tells you who you are, and it's time to make a move.
Yeah, and I was kind of asked about that today because I was tweeting out a bunch of Drew Lock stats, which we're going to get to in the next segment. I was kind of asked about Drew Lock and kind of what happened this year, or what maybe lowered expectations, and I was like, yeah, I mean, look, he hasn't hit what I expected either. He put together that 5-game stretch, and what that looked like made you think that he'd take a bigger step forward, but in the end. And I'll show you with the numbers here in just a second. In the end, this 4-game stretch that he's on right now is actually pretty similar to that 5-game stretch. It took him almost the entire year to get back to where he was, which I think is a little bit of an acknowledgement that, unfortunately, for Drew Lock, his growth was stunted a little bit, not only by the regular offseason, by the change of offensive coordinator. It took him a long time. And even in this game against the Buffalo Bills, we talked about Tim Jenkins. Even in this game against the Buffalo Bills, it seems as though there's still some feeling out. There's still some growth that's happening between Locke and Shermer as they're starting to figure out, or continuing to figure out, what each other likes.
Well, and I loved Tim's analogy where he's talking about we're on a limited menu. They didn't have time to prepare everything, so we got a truncated menu. I love that analogy because that's really is true. They didn't really even have time to do base install. I mean, you got 2 weeks of training camp that wasn't even 2 weeks, no preseason games, no time to get any of it corrected. You just kind of put the basic concepts in there and go. And it's been a trial by fire as these guys try to grow and learn a very complicated, wordy, intense offense, and being the youngest group of guys in the league. So I'm willing to forgive that, but at the same time, I need to see enough to give me confidence in running it back. And right now, I personally would run it back with Locke, but I would also bring in some stiff competition to make sure that you have all your bases covered.